On his 40th birthday, Kevin Hart bought himself the car he had always dreamed of.
My name is Kevin Hart, and I love cars.
He bought it as a celebration, a statement, proof of the distance between where he started and where he had arrived. He called it Menace. 6 weeks later, it went off a highway embankment in Malibu, rolled down a hillside and came to rest, destroyed at the bottom. Hart was a passenger. He was cut from the wreckage with 3 fractured vertebrae and spent 10 days in hospital, followed by months in recovery. The next car he built, he named Hellraiser. That is the story of Kevin Hart's garage, and it is not the story anyone expected. The kid from North Philadelphia. Kevin Hart grew up in a part of Philadelphia that taught him very early what it felt like to want things he could not have. His mother raised him and his brother alone after their father, a cocaine addict, spent most of Hart's childhood in and out of prison. She worked as a systems analyst at the University of Pennsylvania to keep the family going. Hart has spoken often about what that childhood felt like, using humor as a shield, learning to perform before he knew he was performing, and walking past cars on North Philadelphia streets that represented a version of life entirely out of reach. The muscle cars of the late 1960s and early 1970s, Chargers, Barracudas, Chevelle, Road Runners, were everywhere in that world. They were the cars of men who had made it, men with presence, men who were not going to be ignored. The young Kevin Hart could not afford to sit in one, let alone own one. What money eventually bought him was not simply cars. It was the ability to commission versions of those cars that had never previously existed. Better engineered, more powerful, more personal, and every single one of them has a name. Menace, the car that changed everything. In July 2019, Hart took delivery of a 1970 Plymouth Barracuda built by SpeedKore Performance in Grafton, Wisconsin, a shop that would become his most consistent creative partner. The Barracuda had a carbon fiber body, a Hellcat V8, producing over 800 horsepower, and a name that suited the energy of a man who had just turned 40 and felt, by his own account, genuinely invincible. On 1 September 2019, 6 weeks after taking delivery, the Barracuda left Mulholland Highway near Calabasas. Hart was in the passenger seat. The driver, a close friend, lost control. The car went through a fence, hit a tree, and rolled down an embankment. Both Hart and the driver were pulled from the wreckage and taken to hospital with major back injuries. Hart had fractured his spine in 3 places. Surgery followed. Then, months of rehabilitation. He was not driving. He made that clear when he spoke publicly about the accident. But the car, his birthday gift to himself, the machine he had commissioned and named and brought into the world, had put him in a hospital bed. Menace was an accurate name in the end, just not in the way anyone had intended. The car was a total loss. It no longer exists. What came next is the part of the story that tells you who Kevin Hart actually is. Hellraiser, the comeback. He went back to SpeedKore. Not to a different builder, not to a safer car, not to a European grand tour that would draw less attention. He went back to the same shop, the same aesthetic, the same willingness to commission something that could not be bought anywhere else. The result was a 1970 Dodge Charger. He named it Hellraiser. SpeedKore scanned an original 1970 Charger body digitally and used a 5-axis CNC machine to create molds for every panel. The finished body is entirely carbon fiber, not carbon fiber accents, not a carbon fiber bonnet. The complete exterior. Every panel, every surface, every curve translated into aerospace-grade material that is simultaneously lighter and stronger than the steel it replaced. Underneath sits a 1,000 horsepower Elephant Phi 8, mated to an 8-speed automatic transmission sourced from the Dodge Demon. The name Hellraiser is not incidental. It is a statement. A man who had been cut from a wreck with a fractured spine went back to the people who built the car, asked for something more powerful than before, and named it after the thing that raises hell. That is either recklessness or courage depending on your perspective. Hart has said it was the latter. Darkness, the horror begins. Not every car in Hart's collection wears a SpeedKore badge. The 1966 Chevrolet Chevelle was built by Timeless Customs in Camarillo, California, fitted with a supercharged V8 delivering 750 horsepower, and finished in a shade of black so complete and deliberate that Hart had only one name for it: darkness. He has spoken openly about his love of horror films. It is perhaps a slightly unexpected passion for a man whose professional life is built on making people laugh, but the two are not as far apart as they might seem. Hart grew up using humor to manage fear. Horror films, on some level, are about the same trade. The naming system that would define the entire collection begins here. Cars named after things that frighten, things that lurk, things that arrive in the dark without warning. From a man who grew up in circumstances that genuinely frightened him, that is not an affectation. It is autobiography. Michael Myers, the horror takes over. The 1969 Plymouth Road Runner was built by Salvaggio Design and named after the villain from Halloween, the masked, wordless, relentless figure who has haunted cinema for 40 years. The Road Runner's build matches the character, a 426 Hemi Fate delivering 940 horsepower, a stance and attitude that communicates threat before the engine even starts, and a level of visual intensity that led the Good Guys organization to give it their Rod and Custom Muscle Machine of the Year award. The horror theme is now undeniable. Kevin Hart, stand-up comedian, highest-grossing comedy actor of his generation, has built a private garage populated by machines named Menace, Hellraiser, Darkness, and Michael Myers. There is a logic to it that reveals more about his interior life than any interview has managed. The characters that scared him on screen as a child now live in his garage, rebuilt as American muscle with enough power to scare almost anything they encounter. Dark Knight, the most personal car. The 1987 Buick Grand National GNX arrived at SEMA 2022 in Las Vegas, displayed in MagnaFlow's exhibition booth. Hart had commissioned the build but had not seen the finished result. He saw it for the first time on the show floor, alongside thousands of other people. That detail is worth holding. A man who had instructed a team of builders, approved a direction, waded through the months of fabrication, and then encountered the completed version in a public space, surrounded by strangers. That is a very specific kind of trust in the people doing the work. The Grand National GNX is the most unexpected car in the collection by some distance. Not a 1960s muscle car, not a classic American sports car, a 1980s saloon from a GM brand that was barely surviving when the car was produced, in a model year that happened to produce one of the most feared street cars of the decade. The Grand National's reputation on the streets of American cities in the 1980s was outsized relative to its modest appearance. It was fast, it was cheap, it was unglamorous, and it was absolutely everywhere in the kinds of neighborhoods Kevin Hart grew up in. He named it Dark Knight. 650 horsepower in a car that looks like something his neighbors would have been seen in, built to a standard they could never have imagined. Mint condition. The collection completed. The final car is the oldest. A 1958 Chevrolet Corvette converted to a fully open convertible with a 2020 C8 Corvette LT 1V8 transplanted into a body 6 decades its senior. Hart paid $825,000 for it. He named it Mint Condition. In November 2023, Hart brought 11 of his custom builds to the Los Angeles Auto Show and called the exhibition the Kevin Hart Collection. 11 cars. An entire section of a major international automotive showcase. Darkness, Hellraiser, Michael Myers, Dark Knight, Mint Condition. A comedian from North Philadelphia, standing in a convention center, surrounded by machines he had willed into existence. Not bought, not borrowed. Built. He has never quite explained, in a single clean statement, what the collection means to him. He does not need to. A boy who grew up watching muscle cars from the pavement, who bought himself a birthday car that fractured his spine, who went back to the same builders and named his recovery Hellraiser. That boy has already said everything through the names. Kevin Hart's garage is not built around showing the world what he can afford. It is built around creating the cars he dreamed about before he had any reason to believe the dream was possible. Subscribe to Drive Directive and tell us in the comments, which of Kevin Hart's builds do you think is his greatest?